5 seconds out. Good morning and welcome to the New Media Show. My name is Todd Cochran. Of course, I want to welcome my co-host, Mr. Rob Greenlee. Good morning, Rob. How are you?
Doing terrific, Todd. It's great to be back on the show and on all these live streaming platforms. You always work hard to get this show up and going on all these platforms. It's always amazing that it always works.
Well,
most of the time it works.
It doesn't always work, but that's this morning. I was all thumbs, but anyway, welcome everyone to the show. We've got a great show lined up for you today. We're going to be joined by a guest a little bit later. We're going to be joined by Kc Wayland. He is a fictional podcaster, and he's been around the space a long time. So we'll be talking to him. I think he's going to come in at the bottom of the hour here, and we're getting a little late start. I must apologize. I'm dealing with nasal stuff, so didn't take it.
Yeah, I am too. So
I didn't take
both in the same boat.
I didn't take a decongestant this morning when I woke up, but I do have my coffee. So, Rob, lots of stuff going on. I thought this morning that I would have we'd have a big announcement to talk about, but we're on hold. We hope until Tuesday. So, those of you that were anticipating something on Thursday from us and others, it's been pushed to Tuesday, but about Monday. It's here. Wednesday night about 11:30 or 12. Oh, it was late my time. No, it was late East Coast time. It was early my time, 6:37 here, which would have been almost midnight. And I was like, they said, we're holding, we're not going. And I was like, what? Right. What? I've got people with embargoed press releases and partners ready to, with their stuff. And I'm thinking no one's going to get this.
Right.
And by a miracle, no one had their stuff set to auto-publish, so we were like able to put the emergency brakes on at the last minute. So we'll see if we have something Tuesday.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, you kind of have to read between the lines, but I think what's coming is a pretty big and monumental, announcement in the direction of the whole medium. So it'll be good to see this thing happen. But yeah, you're right. There's been some delays.
Yeah. So I'm trying to change the graphic here. Let me get that. There we go. All right. Yeah. So anyway, that, and we would expect that news to come. I hope if it doesn't come next week, it really, we might as well wait to the end of the new year, Yeah.
And then you're getting into the holiday time frame.
Right.
People are off.
And no one's going to see anything anyway, So I'm like, right. But I'm thinking, no, I have to go Tuesday because I've got a whole series of, things planned, and I already had to push things back. So, okay, it is what it is. And read between the lines, folks.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about RAD and the reaction to RAD and the announcement that was made on December 11th by NPR, which came out on Tuesday.
Right.
So they made an announcement that essentially the RAD was continuing to move forward. And there was another companies that were on the RAD blog post press release that said they're being involved. And Acast, AdWiz, Art19, Awesome Sound, Blueberry Podcasting, Panoply, Omni Studio, PodTrack, PRI, PRX, Radio Public, Triton Digital, Wide Orbit, and Wooska have all said they're going to support it. Now,
right, but there was a second list too on here that of companies that support it and have participated in pushing it, but I don't know that they're fully on board yet.
Yes,
so there's kind of two levels.
Yeah. So I think what we have to be aware of here, and so that because there's been a lot of discussion on all the social media platforms, some tweets by some app developers. But if you look at that list, who's on that list, Rob? Podcasting companies, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, podcast hosting and I would argue that some of the people that are on that list don't really need to be there.
Right, that's true.
And I'm not sure actually why they are.
Yeah.
I mean, other than they're content networks, right?
Yeah.
So content networks don't really have entirely a dog to hunt in this game, right? Yeah.
And here's the other list. It says, furthermore, these companies support and participate in RAD have participated in pushing RAD forward. So it's kind of interesting that there's a different list, and I understand why. But Cadence 13, Edison Research, ESPN, Google, iHeart, Libsyn, the New York Times, New York Public Radio, Voxnest, and Wondery.
Right.
So that's a lot of podcasting companies.
That's right. Platforms
that said they
content
would.
Companies.
And, you know, our support is, yes, if the data's out there, we will get it, we will process it, and we will display it to our content creators.
Right.
We would be remiss if we didn't if it was available.
Right.
But I'm not an app developer.
Right.
I don't control the Overcast and the Pocket Cast of the world to implement RAD. So,
well, we are. I mean, we have our own listening apps.
Right. So, you do.
Right.
So let's look at the response from Marco at Overcast. He's like, you know, he could have if he could have put up two middle fingers, he would have, because he said, no, I'm not putting this in my app. You guys already have enough digital data.
Yeah, I mean, he's worried about a lot of the issues that Apple's worried about, and a lot of the issues that a lot of these app companies are concerned about. I mean, what is their real motivation here to put the development time in here? There's nothing in it for them.
Right.
It doesn't really help the listener at all.
No.
At least from what we can tell. And so, you know, if you look at this list of companies, there's only a couple of them in here that actually have apps that would be impacted by this, or players.
Yep.
Now, granted, there's quite a few web players that are built into this list of companies, right? But there's not many apps like you would expect, you know, Pocket Cast.
Well, Pocket Cast, remember, they before they were acquired, they said they would, or when they were acquired, they said, and again, NPR is a owner. Do they? Yeah, owner, partner, whatever. But they said we're still autonomous.
Right.
We're not putting.
And it's not on the list.
And he said we're not putting RAD in. They said that when they were acquired, and they is this a word, reiterated via tweet. Hey, just so everyone knows, we're not putting RAD in. So you've got an NPR owned app that is basically we're not doing it.
Right.
Okay, so that's two. And I saw an interesting, I probably can't quote it. It was in a Slack channel that I'm in.
Yeah.
And someone got a little upset when we asked, or when Daniel asked, hey, where's the app developers? You're going to implement this, implement this thing. Which apps are going to implement this? And the response essentially was, if they want to help the space forward, they will implement RAD. And I was like, whoa. Well, that is kind of that's not the approach.
No.
That's not the approach. The approach is, we'll pay you to implement this, to help your development cost. Here's the benefits. And I still think, you know, they're going to have a hard time. Plus, Apple, are they on board? We don't know. Google, Apple's not on this list anywhere.
No, well, and even Google is not on the will support. It's on the we support the potential idea and have participated at what level of pushing RAD? I'm not sure.
Not much. Not very high.
So Google isn't really fully on board with this either.
Google's stance was that, and I got this from a second party within Blueberry, so it comes from within our company. I didn't hear Google say this direct, that they would have to talk to their different divisions to get buy-in. They think this is good, but they have to run this up the flagpole just like any other big, massive company, and they probably got to get 13 sign-offs,
Right.
So...
And there is a factor here with the GDPR stuff. Is this only gonna benefit people that are users that are in the US and not mostly?
How do they do that then? They assign two different apps. They have to do IP querying to see where the person's. It's a
nightmare. Right?
For us, we just implemented GDPR for US customers as well.
Right.
It was too hard.
Yeah. To do it just in certain IP groups,
right? So we just
can't do that.
So we did it globally, so app developers are going to have to do the same thing. And in my opinion, and there probably will be people that will argue with this, collecting download log data happens by default. It just happens. That's in an Apache log file. We get that information. It's there.
Everybody accepts it. Everybody is okay with it.
It's anonymized, and it follows the GDPR. We mask the IPs. All this rules we had to go through. Now, when you are actually going to track someone when they click play or pass an ad, that's explicitly there's some explicit rules, in my opinion, in the GDPR where when that app loads for the first time, they're going to have to be given a disclaimer. Would you be willing to participate in having your play data recorded and sent back? I don't see any way around that. I just don't.
Right.
Now, I'm sure the NPR folks will come back and say, "Oh, they don't need to do that. This will still be anonymized. This is stuff." But this is different. We're actively collecting behavior.
Right.
And we get some behavior via log files. So what is the difference between log files from a download or behavior from clicking play? I think in my opinion, there's a difference. Now, some lawyer's going to have to tell me whether or not there is or isn't, but we've already set up new terms of service and all this stuff that goes on, and had the lawyers look at it and make sure we're good. So,
yeah. Well, Todd, let's. I think we've talked about kind of the situation fairly extensively, but let's really talk quickly about why. Why is this being pushed, right?
Yeah.
Why is RAD even a big topic for us, right?
Well,
and my thought is that it's this black hole in the industry around downloads, right? Yep. I know that many.
Please don't say that, Rob. There is no black hole around downloads.
I know. That's the perception, though, Todd.
Okay.
Is that once an episode is downloaded, right? You subscribe to it. It downloads to your device. Mm-hmm. It's sitting on your device.
Yep.
And at some point, somebody comes back in there and plays it or not.
I understand.
We don't know that now.
Yep.
Typically. Right. And that's what is going on here. That's what's being tapped into here.
So let's, again, I think the RAD data would be wonderful. And again, we're on support on taking the data on and processing it. Let's be clear. I'm cool with being able to process the data.
Right.
Maybe even our web players that we produce will have, and we're going to have to look at the legalities of that. Are we going to have to do some additional click to agree to allow your web player play to be, we have to dig through that legalities. And,
right.
But the question then becomes is, if you've got Pocket Cast and you've got Overcast that have said no, and as other app developers start looking at this, and there's probably 15, let's just say 15 other app developers, maybe there's 20 that have podcast apps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Those 20 probably only make up about 10%, 12%, 13% of global consumption.
Right.
Combined.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got 6-7%, maybe 10% at the most now for web plays. And then the rest is split between some Android apps and Google Apple Podcast. Again, every show is a little different. You'll have to look down your breakdown and see how people are subscribed.
Right.
So what if Apple says nope? And what if Google says nope? And what if these app podcast apps say, nope.
Yeah.
This is done. Rad is dead. DAD dead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at this point, I'm not sure that it's alive. Actually,
You know,
my honest opinion.
I'm
not sure that it is.
When we introduced Subscribe on Android, we've talked about this a lot on the show. 8 lines of code. We wrote 8 lines of code that could be cut and paste into the app developer's app. That's all we needed was 8 lines of code and instructions where to put it. It took us like 3 years to get up to 13 or 14 apps that were willing to cut and paste 8 lines of code.
Right.
And it was me on the phone, calling, meeting at a conference, explaining what it does, doing a demo. It took us that long, get that many lines of code. Now you're talking about a whole API of stuff.
Right.
I
don't know.
Don't know.
I mean, and also, Todd, let's talk about too. Is this the big breakthrough technology that the industry needs to achieve success? I mean, do we even need RAD? I guess is the bigger question.
It's not going to hurt.
No, it's good to have the data.
Yeah, it's not.
But
so okay, so we've talked about.
Is it going to be a make or break situation?
Well, we've talked about this before. Be careful what you wish for.
Well, Todd, I think Apple with their tracking through Podcast Connect has kind of dissuaded any concerns on that, right? Mostly.
Well, I think what you really get down to is, here's what it could really prove. Let's look at it from a positive standpoint.
Right.
Let's use the theory that we get 100% adoption. We get 100% adoption across the board. We're tracking web players, we're tracking apps. Apple's on board, Google's on board. They're all sending the data back. We're all big kumbaya. All right. And let's say that your show was getting 1,000 downloads an episode, but the RAD data only shows that 500 people got past your ad. Okay. So now you can only bill for 500. But your advertiser's been with you for 2 years and they're already happy. They are thrilled with the performance of your podcast when you are delivering 1,000 downloads. But now we know only 500 people actually listen to the ad. So in my mind, I'm like, hey, we're charging $20 CPM. Let's go to 40. Right?
Right.
Because you're happy. Right?
Yeah.
We've got the perfect data now. Your performance is good. Only half the people actually listen. This is the best advertising venue in the whole planet. Let's go to 40. You know what the media buyers are going to say? It'll be very difficult to get the CPMs up. In display, it happened when display had its when fraud was determined in display, and they were able to eliminate a lot of fraud going on in display on websites.
Right.
The industry said, "Wow, the display is really we've been paying this and getting this. We got rid of the fraud. We're still so they were able to make the jump to push the CPMs up."
Right.
In display.
And fraud is an issue in this medium too. So it's not a big issue,
no,
but it's there. Yeah.
I would say it's very rare we see fraud anymore. I think purposeful fraud.
Yeah. Most of our platforms have built in ways to catch it. I know we have, because for a while there, people were buying plays and downloads. And as long as you can detect that stuff and see it and block it and turn it off and those kind of things, it becomes less of an issue.
Yeah. So if they all say yes and we're all on board and we get the data, then we have to be prepared as a industry to not doom and gloom. Oh my God, the sky is falling. My revenue is going to drop by 50%. No, we have to be of the position that and go back and say, listen, this you are happy at 20. We need to go to 40. And you're going to get the same performance. You're still going to be happy with the performance. But if everyone doesn't do that, companies are going to go out of business.
Right.
So that's in a best case scenario. So probably I think what will end up happening though is we're going to get some that will, some that won't, and then we'll have a percentage of we'll have a bigger story to tell. I don't think we'll ever have rad throughout the entire ecospace. If we do, I'll be honest, I'll be shocked if Apple gets on board. They may. Google, I think there's a higher chance of Google getting on board than there is of Apple getting on board.
Yeah, I agree.
But what's going to happen with the listeners then? Are the listeners going to opt in if we have to give them an opt-in option? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got to look at the Skype here to see if our guest is coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Kc, if you're watching the show, you can dial in anytime.
Yeah.
I just accepted him in Skype. So anyway, we'll see. We'll see where this goes.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to put the tagging in and, it's a lot of work to tag shows. We came up with Metamarks more than 10 years ago. And, and we understand the adoption, how hard because it's just like anything else. We gave this great thing called Subscribe on Android to the community, and most people did this to us. That's okay. Our podcasters are quite happy and having a higher percent of Android listeners.
Yeah,
so it's everyone else's loss. So the question really then becomes: do people give NPR the middle finger? That's the problem. People don't like companies for some reason. It's all about sandboxes. This is my sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
This is my stuff. I don't want to give someone else maybe an advantage here by adopting. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. And if anybody can pull it off, NPR could. But if I came to space, had come to space with Rad, well, we did. We came to space with Metamarks.
Right.
Years ago, and everyone, gave us the double finger, so it's okay. But if anybody can pull it off, NPR can.
Yeah. Well, they've got the resources, and from what I can tell, that they're really all in on it. But it seems like if they want to get it adopted, that they need to figure out a way to get a couple of apps to take it on and start showing some data, right?
Yeah.
So, it could be treated as just a sampling method of what's going on in the medium too. It doesn't have to be on every app and on every platform and all this stuff.
Hello? I just rang Kc in.
Oh yeah. Hey, Kc.
Hey, Todd.
Hey, guys. Hi, Kc. Sorry, guys. Hey, Kc, you just joined us when we're discussing Rad, and I don't know how much you've been following the space, but we're just kind of wrapping up that conversation. But for everyone that doesn't know who Kc is, why don't you introduce yourself? So give everyone the 411. You're a longtime podcaster.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Kc Wayland, and I am the podcast creator behind We're Live. And I've been doing it since 2009, and I'm kind of in the narrative podcast space. I listened to podcast talk shows originally back when they first started back in 2009, and saw it as a great delivery medium for the next wave of audio entertainment, and kind of have been here ever since.
Right.
Yeah, it's been a while. So I should have put up your lower third to see if I can actually do that. So it's the We're Alive podcast, and just so everyone knows, what's the website for that? Is it we'realivepodcast.com or?
Yeah, it's we'realivepodcast.com, and actually it's Kc Wayland. Wayland is the painter that everyone confuses me with sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know how I Just call me stupid. I must have.
No, it's the painter. Everyone kind of associates me with that painter who draws the fish and the whales, and he's from Newport Beach, so we're actually from Orange County area. So actually, it does happen a lot around here.
I'm editing your lower third as we speak.
Thanks, Todd.
Yeah. So, Rob, did you want to wrap up the RAD discussion, and then we'll switch and talk to Kc about his stuff?
Yeah, and certainly if Kc has any thoughts on the RAD stuff too, we'd love to hear that too. So
I have to be brought up to speed on what RAD you're specifically talking about.
Okay. Well, it's an initiative that National Public Radio is pushing out there to be able to track playback at the player level, and then have those listens be reported back through the player back to the hosting platform. So if an episode is downloaded, then there's a tracking on whether or not that episode gets played. So. Oh,
okay. So the discussion is like the feasibility of that, and also what it would do for both, all the hosting platforms, because then you have to then get all the hosting platforms to, synergize with this one technology. So it might be a little difficult.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that, and plus it's a little bit of a violation of the GDPR, and so there's going to have to be opt-in at the player level. And there's not a lot of motivation on the part of the app developers to integrate this, because there's no real benefit to the listener, and there's no real benefit to what they're doing, and it just takes resources. So the announcement that came out about this basically listed a bunch of hosting platforms and content companies, but didn't really list very many app platforms.
Actually, zero.
Right.
Yeah. And that's where, if you're going to track all the numbers, you need to track all the numbers. So I'm kind of curious to see what they want to do with that in the future then.
It's true. And here's the interesting thing too, is you're going to put this data in your file. It's going to go in the ID3 tags. It's going to tell you where these signals or this ping needs to be sent when you get past an ad, or when you hit start, or you hit play, you hit stop. There's actions that happen with a specific, it's just basically the shuffle ahead, all this kind of stuff that's going to come through. So your phone is going to be actively going ding, ding, ding to some place in the sky. But here's the bigger challenge too, Rob, is, and Kc, there's not going to be any central RAD server. So, for example, NPR will have their own, Blueberry will have their own, Libsyn will have their own, Spreaker will have their own, because of course no one wants their data going to a central repository. Now, if we were all smart, if we were all smart, we would set it up so that this all went to a master location, and it would be segmented so that no one on another third party couldn't get access to another company's RAD data. But the problem is,
also it's not fudged in any way too, that
right. So, but the problem is, you got to trust someone and some entity to run the master RAD server in the sky. I don't think it'll ever happen. I think you'll have Blueberry will say, you put this in your MP3 tags. That's all cool. That's a cool while you're hosting with Blueberry. But what happens when they say, I don't want to be with Blueberry no more. I want to go over to Libsyn.
Yeah. And
then the media gets migrated over to Libsyn, and then all of a sudden they're still pinging us and they're not pinging Libsyn. That has to be all worked out, because we're going to have to redirect the RAD pings too. Not only the feeds, but the RAD pings. So,
right, yeah, because that URL that it pings is going to be embedded in the ID3 tags of the MP3 file.
Yeah. So
you know what might work, actually, just thinking about it, because I've actually been thinking about this technically in some ways too, is what if they actually had like a master RSS redirectory that has all the RSSs of the world basically track through that one repository. And that way it's like old feed burner days where it's just redirecting the RSS and can track as the intermediary.
Right.
Interesting. That's an interesting idea. The problem you have then is you've got people that have sandboxes that'll say, You can't have your RS feed over there. It's not trusted.
Yeah, you'd have to establish some sort of like standardization, and everyone would have to. It'd have to be a neutral party, basically, somebody who's not producing anything, who's just basically a manager.
Yeah.
Well, Todd, the advertiser partners would like it because it'd be standardized.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Todd, this kind of raises. I mean, these topics are starting to raise an issue and issues that could be linked up with some association that we've been talking about, right? Yep. To help bring the industry together and come up with some consensus, if that's even possible. I don't know that it's possible, but if
anything's possible with enough charisma.
Right. But to have some sort of a group that gets together that kind of wants to work together to come up with some solutions here, instead of having one group, like NPR out there trying to solve an industry problem that can be seen as a little bit, like my solution that I want everybody else to get by on, or it needs to be more of a neutral party. And Todd, like what you were talking about, we really should have a central depository to be able to track ratings, because what PodTrack is doing is not a complete solution, but it's also being portrayed as an industry ranker, right? But it's not.
It's not even 1/10 of all the shows that it should be in that list.
Right. Yeah, and you have to submit to their system. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and you have to use their actual redirect and their URLs to be able to get tracked. And very few podcasts are using PodTrack's redirect.
It's kind of funny because one of our enterprise clients uses our stats for advertising reporting and uses PodTrack to be on their top 10 list.
Wow. There's a lot of shady things going on in terms of statistics and numbers that you have to look out for out there, because it's a lot of people will float their impressions. There is
a way ahead on that, but we've talked about that a lot in the private. I don't know if you know it, Kc, or not, but there is actually certification going on right now. There's 6 companies in the certification bucket from the IAB. So we're actually going to have companies that have been fully audited, basically their code examined down line by line, auditing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, everything, looking at log file processing, safeguards.
It's like a 3 or 4 month process.
That makes sense.
I'm going to say anal probe of extreme measures.
I wasn't going to say it, but
having been through it is an anal probe.
Well, that's good then. So you're done with it then, I take it.
We're done. We're just waiting for a little piece of paper.
Nice. Very well. Congratulations. You survived that deep probe.
And Rob,
we're going through it right now.
Right. Rob's company's going through it. Yeah. So anyway, we've talked enough. We've talked a lot about IAB stuff already in the past. So let's talk about what you've been doing. First of all, are you going to be going to PodCon?
No, I'm not planning on it at the moment. I'm kind of a little bit immobilized. Behind me, I don't know if you can see it, I'm kind of recovering from hip surgery, so a lot of my plans have kind of been kiboshed for the last month or so.
Right.
So I have no idea what the next couple months are for me, because I'm catching up on a lot of things right now.
Yeah, PodCon, Rob and I attended last year. I'm sending younger people this year, but that's a whole different story. But PodCon blew us away. It was basically a con, like a Comic Con, but for podcasters. And we had fans that were dressed up in character, doing all kinds of
from podcast.
Right.
Yeah,
doing all kind, and there was all kinds of, blown me away creative stuff going on, and it was probably 90% storytellers that were there thinking about doing stories. So you've been doing this a while. You've been.
I really should probably make it out there. I'm looking at the dates right now ahead of time, just trying to think about it, because it is. I don't know. It's like I'm still not able to walk yet, so that's gotten a little close.
But it's maybe put it down for a follow-on year to go if they.
2020 might be actually be a really a good one to target then, because I'll be up and running for sure by then. Hope, knock on wood.
Yeah. So, and I'm not, I don't listen to a lot of storytelling podcasts. I know Rob does, but I guess let's talk a little bit about, first of all, why did you start doing a storytelling podcast, and how's that process been over the past 10 years or so?
It's been a long process, and I kind of started out in a weird way because I come from the film land, and I realized early on that the indie route was starting to die because festivals were taken over by, there was no way of getting you as a screenwriter or a storyteller out there in a big way. And YouTube, the shorts, I was like, the video shorts aren't going to do anything. So I kind of was thinking about other ways of getting myself out there, and I like doing long form. And so since I did a lot of sound design and film, and since I had done animation stuff with voiceover, it kind of found a good balance between them, married them together, and found that podcast was the great way to get my stories out there.
Rob, go ahead.
Tell us about your journey with your We're Alive podcast. I know when I was working on Zune is when you launched that, and
yeah,
that was definitely a fascinating journey that you went on to get that show developed and all the seasons, and how you actually took that to market, and how and what you learned about that process.
Yeah, it's that whole the way We're Alive started, and actually still continues because we're still working on it now with the next iterations. It's never gotten more easier, if that makes sense. Like, it's complicated itself as it's grown. So starting out, especially early on when there were very few models of people doing this in the industry, there was, I think, one other person doing something, and so I kind of had to figure out how to, create something from scratch, and the seasonal model was something actually that no one else was doing at the time. So I think we may have been one of the first of like, we'll do one season, take a break, and then do a second season, and so on and so forth. So it's been a one big experiment, and kind of an ongoing one too, because I think even the industry now is still figuring it out, and I think in some ways we're ahead. I think we know a little bit more about how to tell some things a little bit easier and communicate better through sound, just because we've done it for so long, than some of these ones that are just starting out. But I think it's just something that will continually change and continually grow over the next several years as well. So
you started off with using kind of actors that were more, more just voiceover people, but it sounded like over the last couple seasons you've started to use SAG actors and larger name actors in your productions, and obviously you had to develop some business models around that. Why don't you talk to us a bit about that, about how you basically kind of windowed this podcast over the last few years?
Well, where We're Alive started, it was a lot of really small, I'm not going to say small actors, I'm going to say small casting in terms of like the budgets that we had, just because we couldn't pay everybody a lot, which limited who would be volunteering for these types of roles. But we actually got an amazing feedback in the beginning when we first created this, and had a great bunch of actors. Actually, most of them didn't come from the voiceover world, and I think that's actually one of the things that gave us a kind of leg up, is we just chose actors who were on the screen, rather than focusing on just voice stuff. Because weirdly enough, I worked with a lot of voiceover actors, and they get really voiceovery. They sound kind of cartoony after a while. Like, they're used to kind of reading by themselves and not interacting with other people. And so when I would put them in rooms with people and have them interact with them, the voiceover actors really struggled, whereas the real actors, not real in terms of, but the screen actors, would have more interactivity, more playability between each other. So that was kind of an experiment as well along the way. And then as it grew, then we were able to kind of get more of the bigger names involved, and the finances behind them kind of came, because then we were able to grab on the higher CPMs and the higher, basically the bigger sponsors, who then would work with the EPs and basically do like, package buyouts and things like that.
So you started out with the first season of We're Alive as a free podcast, and those were like, I think, what they are, 20-minute episodes, something like that.
Roughly, yeah. The entire, actually, the whole series is still available for free. The first season or first series actually is like 128 episodes, all free still. But we have some pay versions that don't have advertisements or commercial breaks and things like that. It's a little bit more of the remastered, clean version.
Yeah, so you took that series and you created longer episodes, and did you sell them through Audible? Was that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the remasters. So the way that it's formatted on the podcast is that the episodes were broken up into 3 parts, and those 3 parts were actually just part of one chapter. So what we did, we just removed the breaks, had it all put together, because really when we wrote them as a chapter. So when they were put back together, it seemed more seamless, and then the listening experience was more cohesive. But podcasting doesn't lend itself to that format as much. So it's interesting that the pay-for medium actually works better with long form versus the podcast medium works better short form.
Yeah. Well, plus you get more opportunity to embed, any kind of advertising or whatever in that content too. So your podcast version of it had advertising in it, right? So are you using dynamic ad insertion technology with that?
Right now, actually, so for the last 2 hosting iterations we've done dynamic ad insertions. The first one we did was with Art19, and now that we're partnering with Podcast One, we're basically having their dynamic insertion system in place. So it's they can change them out very easily. And matter of fact, actually, weirdly enough, in California, we have currently a cannabis ad that's partnered with the show that we created with the company. That's actually specifically only to California because that was where it is legal. So it's kind of fun. It's interesting how they can now centralize the advertisements depending on the regions. So as we expand and get a little bit bigger, we can then compartmentalize region ads.
So do you see the market for storytelling podcasts really expanding here over the next couple of years, or where do you see it right now, especially from your position down in the LA area down there around, all these scripts and TV series that never get produced? Do you see a potential of a kind of an explosion of new content coming into the audio medium now?
Oh, yes. And I have heard whispers and rumors, and I've been in talks of a lot of stuff over the last couple of years. It's been increasingly growing more and more as people have seen this as a very viable medium for entertainment. And that's awesome for us, because really it just means that people are looking at this like, oh no, we believe this is the entertainment ground that I actually thought it was too back in 2009, and now people are finally catching on, and it's going to keep on going because it's like the movie proving ground. It's allowing a lot of stories to kind of come out there in a low budget way and test and see how they do against the market, and actually be able to give them some dynamic feedback of, oh, here's our metrics from Facebook, and here's what our fan base is. And it's actually, as these standards, like you're talking about earlier, get more concrete, we can actually give more statistical data to these entities. And basically it's kind of fun because then we have more money to play with in the productions, because we then have Hollywood kind of using it as a backing ground for the next visual mediums.
Todd, do you have any other thoughts?
No, I just, it's fascinating to me, and I think a lot of people are probably thinking, when you talk about hiring more mainstream actors, was, whoa, what did that cost? What was your budget?
Right.
So, can you break it down on, a rough cost per episode when you're bringing in, I guess what you would call mainstream actors, or more well-known, someone that you may recognize by name?
Cool. Yes. And this is the tricky part, because it's always one of those things where there are 2 halves to every deal when you're dealing with mainstream actors. Is they either are going to get paid up front a decent amount, or they're going to get points on the back end, meaning they get percentages of royalties afterwards. So some of the bigger name actors that I worked with on Bronzeville, the point-based structure that they were given on the back end and some of the front end, I was not privy to specifically, but I know the kind of the ballparks. But what I can actually say, let me tell you what I can do on my productions, because Bronzeville is one of those ones where it's like I can't tell you the point structure, so it's kind of like a moot point of how much they got paid up front. But for ours, so medium, higher grade, and middle grade actors, so if you're a starting out actor, the day rate can be anywhere from like $300 to $500. That's like somebody who's SAG SAG, meaning the union that's in LA, the minimum you pay an actor for new media contracts is at least minimum $15 an hour. Basically, it's minimum wage is as low as you can go for contracts. But you have the ability to negotiate points inside those contracts. But the typical ones that I've seen is about $300 to $500 a day for people who are a pretty starting out actor, and then if you get more qualifying, you can get to be about $500-600 a day, and then once you start getting into names, it gets to be maybe $2,000, $4,000, $5,000 just a session. So it depends on the name of the person and what your scale is, and also the project too. Because I've been able to get people on a project just because, like, hey, this is really cool and really fun. You mind? This is the rate. It's not great, but it'll be a lot of fun experience in the studio, and we have a controlled environment where we're just laughing and having a good time. So it's one of these things where you kind of can entice people with not just pay but also points, and also the project is a budding thing. So it's a kind of leverage how you get somebody.
But you also have to be in Los Angeles. You got to be where they are. You can't be in Boise and do this.
True. So you can do remote. You can do remote recording. So yeah, I mean, for anybody who's willing to who's willing to pay for the studio time on top of the person's time, as long as they use something like. So we've used LA Studios in LA, which is right by where is it? Universal Studios, and so we recorded Bronzeville there. And the great thing is they actually have remote recording studios with Skype, and so I've been able to remote record with them with like Lawrence Fishburne or Lorenz Tate from wherever I'm at, and then they just send me the files afterwards, and I'm able to then integrate them in. So while if you want to do the dynamic reads where you read with them with two actors, it's better to be there in person, but you can still do the remote recording acting for other names as well.
Yeah, makes sense.
Do you use double ender technology for that mainly?
I don't particularly. If I'm ever doing like two people reading with each other, I've never done like the dual records. Typically because I focus on one person in a pickup if I'm doing a remote. That's just my personal preference, because if I'm doing a remote session with two people, it's much harder to focus on their qualities of both people, because it's hard enough to focus on a singular voice.
Gotcha. Yeah,
remotes get very tricky, but in person, I can track about 3 or 4 to 5 to 7 people easily, because then you're in there and you can hear everyone and how they're interacting with each other. So it's much easier in person versus remote.
So how do you see the market for these type of podcasts kind of developing and the evolution of this stuff? Because I know that there's been a lot of talk about, some Netflix of podcasting coming about as it relates to this kind of content. And also that, we're starting to see some of these podcasts get converted into TV and possibly movies. And so, like what you were just saying just a few minutes ago, you were talking about how this is kind of like a proving ground for a story and how it can build audiences. That, you think, where we're going to really evolve into? Is that a lot of these stories come into audio first and then possibly move to the big and small screen?
Absolutely. No, it's going to continue to grow for that one reason. I think that one of the things that we're going to see in the next 2 to 3 years is we're going to see a couple big companies that are going to be strictly dedicated producing this kind of stuff, and then working with deals to try and do TV stuff in interchange, because the TV stuff is where the bigger money will be able to come in to support those larger companies. But also, once you get someone established, then you'll be able to work better with your advertising partners. I think one of the things that's really detrimental to the audio medium of storytelling right now is the advertising partners aren't always the best ones.
Yep.
They're not supportive of what you're telling. They don't work with the story you're telling sometimes. And like the one we just did with Ease, which was the cannabis company, was like we worked into the story. We're stuck inside in the zombie apocalypse. We can't go outside, so we're stressed out. A cannabis delivery service in California is awesome because you don't have to go outside and deal with traffic. And so there's like that kind of stuff there's so many opportunities of really great interplay with stories. And they did it back in the old time radio days.
Yep.
They just need to figure out how to do it again. And the quality of the medium, once that goes up, these partners are going to come in there and be like, awesome. you got a listener base, you got the story. Let's work with you and really make this more integrated in direct advertising. And then you're going to get more productions because the money will start flowing through everything better.
I had a very serious discussion at NAB with a, it was one of the, on cable TV is one of those packages you pay for extra. Yeah, so I'll just give you, one of those movie packages you pay for extra, and they do their own production. So that's just, you can kind of guess here. So anyway, I was talking with them, and they said, here's our idea. He said, the series, you do 13 weeks or whatever it is, and or 10 episodes, and you've got 6 months, or like Game of Thrones now, we've got, a year and a half off between the next run of Game of Thrones. And so he said, what do you think if we had the actors continuing the story audibly and filling in like these stuff? You've got something that happened in episode 3 that left some open ends, or you could take this in the production cost, he said, would be, a fraction, if it cost $5 million to do an episode of Game of Thrones, probably more than that. I don't know what it costs to do an episode of Game of Thrones, but
it's huge.
It's huge. But if you have $100,000 or $25,000, and you could do a podcast episode or a series after the series, he said, "What do you think?" And I'm like, yes. That would be like, wow. And imagine to me, I was like, almost jumping out of my skin, because I'm thinking we all have a specific series on TV that we watch. Even if we've cord cut, we're subscribed to Hulu or subscribed to Netflix versus, and if there was a story after the story, some, like HBO's done those 2 minutes of, narrative, but we're not talking about narrative. We're talking about the story continuing on a podcast.
Yeah.
That's what I'm excited about. Yeah. So, have you been approached to doing that kind of stuff?
Well, I'll be honest, that's what I've been doing for a long time in terms of just trying to do more of that. Matter of fact, actually, right now, so we've done the audio medium, and then so our next one is Gold Rush, which is another audio one. But then we've worked now with Geek and Sundry and Legendary, and we've made a show called We're Live Frontier, which is actually an RPG role-playing game set inside of our world that actually is creating active canon that works into the other storylines. So it's actually, the story is continuing through this really cool, expanding new medium that's actually canon with the other stuff that I'm doing inside the podcast world. So, and also I'm doing print medium too. So we have audio, print, and then also this visual medium of the gameplay. And then one day, if we have the visual medium of television, we'll have that as well. So multimedium is kind of the story that I've been wanting to do with this for We're Alive for a long time.
We've seen a few shows made into TV series, but we've really never seen. Have we seen anything like this, Rob, where a show like theirs makes the jump and it becomes a television series, where it becomes the primary focal point versus
Lore?
Yeah,
Lore was one.
The Lore was one.
Yeah, and there's a couple
Lore
more
in the podcast Homecoming, with Gimlet, made that jump.
And literally this week, Paul Bay just announced Black Tapes has a NBC home. So there's a lot of stuff that's getting optioned out there that's coming about. Like I said, podcasts are the proving ground, and people are really picking up on that now.
Any speculation what Lore got paid on that? Did they get $20 million? Did they?
I couldn't say. It was probably points, options. Those deals that are Hollywood contracts, everyone is so specific that you don't know if they got $1 and 1,000 points or $50,000 and no points. So weirdly enough, one is better than the other depending on how well it does.
Right.
So
That's
it's kind of like
if it bombs,
every one of these contracts are gambles in a way. You never know.
Yeah, if it bombs, the money up front's good, and if it's a Toy Story, then the points are good. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the Little Miss Sunshine clause, where like it's a small budget, but then rockets through the roof, and if you didn't have points on that, then you're stuck.
Yeah, or you're rich.
Yeah.
Those,
and the rich can gamble more. Yeah.
Yeah, and those lawyers down in LA are sharks too. Yeah.
On both sides, I'm sure.
They are. And so even as a content creator, you have to protect yourself. And like that's why as a writer, I keep track of everything I write, down to the word, the T, everything, in case ever one day you have to deal with stuff. So you always have to CYA.
So so Kc, let's talk about what's the opportunity for the broader podcast marketplace to tap into the storytelling stuff. I mean, we talked about PodCon, and what Todd didn't say was that there's young people that are taking massive kind of interest in this, right?
I was shocked.
Right. I mean, and I saw it up at the Vancouver Podcast Festival. I mean, a lot of new people getting involved in the medium right now see podcasting as a storytelling medium now, more and more. I mean, it was really shocking to me. I mean, I went to some after hours events where, that we had up on stage, storytelling podcasters that were up there, and the people in the audience were in their 20s, and I could hear them talking behind me about how excited they were to maybe do this themselves somehow. I mean, is there a pathway, you think, for regular people to get together and learn these skills rapidly and to produce content?
It's happening actually right now. We're seeing a lot of them out there that are using voices remotely, that are combining them together. It's happening. There's a lot of communities around the audio drama world that are now building up, and I myself, I'm trying to foster them the best I can. Actually, one of the things that I did was I wrote a book called Bombs Always Beep that actually models creating modern audio drama and looks at the podcast model, but also focuses on, okay, so you're going to tell something in the audio medium, make it something that's audio specific, that uses the medium in a way to tell your story in a positive way, rather than just using this as the intermediary of getting your story out there. Like, why are we listening to this? And I think that's one of the reasons why We're Alive works and why other stories can work as well, and why some don't work, is because not all stories work for audio. But it's getting easier and easier, I think, for everyone to kind of come into this space at the ground level, with the availability of mics and more inexpensive equipment.
I think the thing, I want to go back to something Rob said though that struck me, and he alluded to it, is I said I'm not going to PodCon, and the reason I'm not going is because a 20-something-year-old, or even 18, that is in this creative space. The last person they want to is a 50-year-old guy with graying hair and balding. So I'm sending the young members of my team largely because they'll be cool to hang out and interact with them. But I'm excited from the standpoint, and I give this example. Maybe this won't surprise you at all, but it really set me back in my seat. I was walking around the day we were setting up at the first PodCon, and there was an area, and I've told this story 3 or 4 times on the show already, but there was an area that had a bulletin board, and it basically was blank, and it said, create your own podcast advertisement flyer, something like that. And there were some tables over there with some books with scrap paper and, just everything you would think to be like a arts and crafts spot where you could tear stuff out and cut it up and, block letters and all that kind of stuff. And I'll be frank, I rolled my eyes. And I was like, that's the stupidest thing. Podcasters will never sit down and create a podcast ad. Came back the next day and the board was full, and there was like 10, 20 people sitting around these tables making these creative flyers, and I just like, whoa. So
you got to change your thinking a little bit.
Yeah, I wasn't an arts guy. I'm not a creative storyteller. It's not who I am. So to me, I was like, oh man, was I wrong? You better wake up. And that to me was really kind of a point where I fully understood, at least at that event, that these are not tech show podcasters. These are not business shows. These are not these are not guys that are going to do the next On Fire show. These are storytellers. So for me, that was kind of the thing that set me back, and I was just like, smack me in the face,
Well, look at YouTube. YouTube is filled with so many young entrepreneurial, hosting people who are just really good at communicating with people. And so the talk shows of podcasts, aren't the same as YouTube because they see the faces, I think. But I think the storytelling is going to be the next that of podcasting. I think it'll be the storytelling inside the podcasting world is so accessible, just like the people of the talent of YouTube is so accessible. I kind of equate them in similar ways, where it's just a better way for people to get their art out there and get themselves as a storyteller out there.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, are you noticing in LA is the kind of creative community down there from a actor perspective and a celebrity perspective? Are they taking notice of this and being
some of them
proactive
are
about wanting to get involved in these kind of projects?
Some of them are, but then also some of them are hesitant. I will be honest, when I first was sending out emails to try and get a big voice involved with the podcast several years ago, that was much harder than it is now because I had to explain what the hell it was. Now,
Right.
now I'm like, they're like, okay, cool. How much? Nah, I don't know. That's usually what it ends up being.
Sure.
Or we'd love to do it, but we just don't have the time. Thank you very much for your interest. So, and it's one of those things where it's like, all I wanted was an hour in a studio in LA, and I was, okay. All right. So
because I know a lot of them have been doing these animated movies, right? In that they'll go into the studio and voice those animated characters, and it's probably not a whole lot different than that, I wouldn't think.
It's not, but the money's different. The money's better.
The money's
for that.
different. Yeah, right.
It's honestly and they know that the visual medium is going to be seen by many more people than this. But wait until all of a sudden actors realize that, I can prove that I'm a better actor in the audio space than in the visual space because I have more creative freedom. Like on Bronzeville, working with Lawrence Fishburne and Lawrence Tate, everyone who worked there, there was such a huge cast of amazing actors, and every one of them was like, this is what acting is. This is the raw thing that I love. That I'm not waiting for a camera. I'm not holding on set. I'm stepping up to a microphone. I'm jumping in the character all day. It's so much of a creative, cool experience for them. I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting for the time when people go, I'd rather do this than visual.
Right. Well, and I wonder if at some point we'll see, let's say, an Academy Award for Best Audio Drama or something. I don't know. I mean, I could certainly see something like that happen at some point. But yeah.
Didn't mean for that to come on my picture. Sorry about that.
That was cool. I didn't even know that feature existed.
I didn't know either until now.
Hey, I do have since your time is limited here, so I think of studios that are out there right now, Podcast Detroit, the folks, the Garage in Boston, and, we're building a studio in Columbus in our offices, and it's a traditional sit-down studio with 5 or 6 positions. What is the layout? Real quick, is these all stand-up booths that people are in? Are you at a table talking to each other? How is the?
I'm glad you asked because literally July I just finished building my own that's specific to this. And I built it kind of out of we don't have much space in California and cost of rent is high, but we actually got a little studio and it's very long. But what I did was I built it with a wood frame inside the room and built a room within a room and within a room, so to speak. So the isolation of the wood and everything, it wasn't expensive, but basically what you're going for is you try to get a space that has 0 reverb, meaning that there's no echo at all, because echo gives the environment paired with your voice. So you can't put anybody in any other environment unless it's at 0 reverb. So you kind of want to build a space where you can do that, but also allow, it's big enough for enough people to be in there to interact with each other, but also cool. So you can kind of, have a comfortable environment, but also quiet for the audio. So it's kind of this really special mix, and you can do the remote sessions, but really just like theater, when everyone's in that room acting together, it is something that you cannot replace through any remote sessions. This can't be done.
Because for this to succeed, you've had 9 years here to figure out the model, and for others to do this, they're not going to have budget to go into studio. They're going to be around a kitchen table or in a room that they've kind of thrown 3 or 4 mics in that they're trying to figure out how to make this work. So, I think from my perspective is that the lessons on how, because they're already creative, they know how to do what they want to do. They have an idea. The how may be missing in order to create the best product. So
there's always a way. So that's the way that I've gotten to now. But the
Sure.
guerrilla way is still very, very easy. Actually, I'm sitting in a room. I wish I could tilt my camera because in the ceiling, I have one of these guerrilla ways. It's basically I have rolled up blankets into the ceiling that basically can drop down and make a 4 blanket box.
Nice.
And that was just enough. And people can do that in the garage and the living rooms to where they can just drop blankets around you, and then you have enough isolation. Or step into a closet and record into the clothing, and your voice won't bounce back into you.
Right.
So there's a lot of ways of getting voice isolation without that studio environment. But it's just about being creative. And basically, cloth just dampens sound. So how can you creatively do it? I know people who actually they take their mattress, they put it up against the wall in their apartment, and then they basically drape blankets around it and all the way across, so they have that isolation.
Yeah.
So if there's a will, there's a way. You have to find that way to dampen whatever extra noise you can.
Yeah, and in this room here that I am, I've got a monitor right here, and the monitor sometimes bounces the audio right back into the backside of the condenser mic, and so you end up with that reverb that you don't want. So, very cool.
And it sounds like you're in that space. So, if you were doing a bunker situation, that's a perfect environment you can record in there. And so, if you want to create a story around that, you could. It's all about maybe just finding the best way to story device your environment and what your restrictions are.
Rob, any questions for Kc before he goes?
Yeah, Kc, is there any resources that you know out there right now that that a person can go to learn how to do these? From a script perspective, from a fully designed sound depth. I mean, is there any resources that you're aware of that can educate? I know it's something that we're thinking about as a company of doing some educational programs and working with talented producers like yourself to educate people on how best to produce these.
Yeah, actually, one of the things I did last year was I set some time aside while I was ramping up for another production, and I wrote Bombs Always Beep, basically as a model, as sort of a guide for anybody who wants to do this medium, because it talks about how to write script writing format for audio, what's important with that. Even if you have a small budget, there's guerrilla filmmaking or audio making techniques inside of there. It's all about just really kind of, being creative in the space and finding that right mix for you. So that's so the book is called Bombs Always Beep, and it's on bombsalwaysbeep.com, and it's really only a $20 ebook that will kind of give you a fully flushed version of what's out there and how to do it nowadays. A lot of the other stuff that I was reading ahead of time and I was looking out there, a lot of it covers the history of audio drama and old time radio, which is not beneficial for anybody in the modern era, because those production methods and even the way they write is so different now. We can't use that as our model. So it has to be more modern. And so that's one of the resources that I put out there to try and get more people into the space.
Awesome.
So what's your preferred recording tools or editing tools? Is it Reaper or is it something else?
Pro Tools. Pro Tools still, Reaper is a great medium and it's getting up there. But Pro Tools has more automation, more plugin tools that are more within the workflow that I like. Because we do such big multicast, multi-track recording, all the environments that we're in are all Pro Tools native. So it's much easier to take the session and then work it into our audio post-production workflow right out the gate, rather than having to go, in between something else, because we actually use timecode as our guiding light between all the scripts. So as we go through and do script supervising in the script, we have timecode matching everything, because we don't record in order and we don't record in story order. So it gets really complicated once you get to a certain level of production. And dealing with actors' schedules, like Bronzeville could not be recorded in order. So, and that was one of the biggest productions. We only had 2 weeks to record. So super, super crazy, scheduling on my part for that one. But that manual and how I broke it down, and it was in that book, and it kind of made it so I was able to do that crazy multitasking in that production.
So all aspects of the production are in your script too, like the type of sound effects, the time, the duration, all those Foley effects are built into the script, or is that all done in post production? You just add that.
One of the things inside the book that I do as a model or that idea is that the script is sort of like a working version of the story, but then when you're dealing with sound effects and stuff, that you can work some into the story, but really a sound designer should come in later, look at the script, and start to make those decisions for themselves in the creative process. So it's how it works in Hollywood, to where like you don't put any directing notes in the script for the actor, because it's all going to be up to the director and interpretation. So it's one of these things where you don't want to pigeonhole your script too much with sound effects or direction. You kind of want to just communicate the story best to the actor and everybody else who's involved.
So it's just a matter of getting those sound bits that you need to put the puzzle together, is what you're talking about, it sounds like.
Exactly. And I kind of cover that in the book of like how you approach a story and how you start to think about it through sound. Like just yesterday, because I teach at Chapman screenwriting and also audio direction stuff. So one of the things that I'm very adamant about is really approaching sound in a creatively. And when somebody sits at a table like this, somebody comes in and sets down a cup and a glass. There's actions that people do that make sounds in a character introduction that you have to start being aware of. So I talk a little bit about that and starting to think about sound in a storytelling way, and what something means. A creak in a chair can mean something more, and that kind of thing. And how can you tell story without dialogue and strictly only through sound? And how not to exceed the limitations of sound, because sound can also overload a listener. So it's a lot to consider in sound mediums, and I think a lot that goes on that people don't think about, because sound is all infinite, but it's also finite, because you can overload someone's senses very easily.
Cool.
Can you get like a sound effect library?
Plenty.
I mean, is that available online from the standpoint of standard sounds like you use, or do you produce all your sound effects and things like that yourself?
Well, it depends on, like, if you have hard effects, meaning that like if it's a gunshot or something, those usually can come from sound effects library very easily, and those are hard for you to capture. But if a character is actually touching or interacting with something in a scene, it's almost easier to throw on a microphone and do it at your desk. Even if there's extra reverb in the room, it's still going to work better than some of the sound effects you're going to find. Like, if I have a character who's nervously fidgeting with a water bottle and they're tapping on it, they're like, you can feel their fingers going through, and they're like on the desk doing things. You can feel that nervous energy in the sound, and so you can perform it better than a sound effect. So it's kind of one of those things where you yourself has to determine, is a hard effect better or is a Foley effect better?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Rob, Kc has to roll, so we appreciate you being on, Kc. Anything?
Thank you.
Hey, where can folks find you? Where's the best place for them to start? What's the...
Sure. So I'll do the massive dump of where to find me. So We're Alive, which is our flagship show, is at we'realive.com. But then our other productions that we do are on waylandproductions.com. And we actually have one launching this week called Improv Effects, which is very much in this audio storytelling medium. But what we do here is we take improvisational actors who are telling a story, and then we have them record in the audio studio, and then we remove all the sound around them and put them inside the world of sound. So we're actually doing some really creative experimentation, and that actually premieres on December 17th. So just on Monday coming up here. So our next show is our next experiment is about to hit the block. So we'll see how it goes.
Awesome.
Great.
Thanks for being on with us, and everyone check Kc stuff out. Sounds cool. Yeah. I definitely learned some stuff today, but have a great weekend and have a happy holiday too.
You too. Thank you, Todd and Rob, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Take care.
Thank you, Kc. It was great.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
So Rob, wow.
Yes.
It's not cheap to do these with a high level of actors, is it?
No, I think that there's definitely different levels that we're starting to see happen. I know I'm hearing more and more, productions coming out, right, that are taking advantage of these remote recording situations and friends getting together and producing these programs, and some of them sound really good.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been really impressed, and I know that they're low budget productions, and I think we're just going to see a lot of people jumping into this and creating different shows, and And so it'll be interesting to see this whole market develop here over the next year, because I think it's really going to take off, especially as the big guys down in LA start to really do more of this stuff. It's going to inspire a lot of others to want to do the same.
One of the goals that I've given the team when they go to PodCon is that I want them to ask the question, were you here last year?
Right.
And did you start a show? And if you did, how did it go? Or are you still doing it? Are you getting ready to do season 2? Because most of these that are doing these are doing them in seasons. So that's kind of the question I'm looking for to find out. All those creative people were there. Did they kick off and do something, or are they still pod planning their show? So it's to me, that's going to be the exciting part, to see what's happened over the last year with all those creators.
Right. Yeah. It definitely will be interesting. So anyway, I was great, and I think it's only going to be something that develops more here in 2019, and it's going to, it's a new genre. It's kind of like what we went through when the comedians got in, and it's just kind of like another, I think bump in the podcasting space that we're going to see over the next couple of years. And it's going to be driven by this particular genre of content. So, and that's really, really all it is. But Todd, did you want to, in the last 10 minutes or so, did you want to talk about some of the other topics in the space?
Yeah, absolutely. We can switch gears here. Start.
Okay.
After that, my brain is like, one thing about, I guess, Rob, I think the one thing that we have to really realize here is this space has just got infinite potential, doesn't it?
Right. No, it is, and I think we're just trying to get it figured out, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to make it as good as we can, and there's a lot of creative ideas. I know that's the thing that's really marked this industry from day one. Is there's a lot of experimentation, a lot of people pushing the envelope on things that they do. This whole rad thing, which we kind of beat up a little bit.
Yeah,
it's a great idea. Oftentimes it gets down to how it's implemented, or how it's done, or whether or not the timing is right. And I think a lot of these things, we just have to work our way through, because sometimes they don't make sense.
Yep.
But I know that the Nielsen folks came out with some research here that saying that 19% of all U.S. adults are listening to podcasts every week, which I believe is up 2% from the Edison research data that came out last year.
So 19%. I'd like to see that about 50, but I'll take 19.
Right.
That's a pretty good number if we're increasing. If you think that 19% of U.S. adults listen to a podcast, that's
every week. That's every week.
That's an impressive number, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So I think we all can be encouraged by that statistic. But they reduce.
It's not a hockey stick growth.
No, it's not. But they do have this. They call it the Total Audio Report, and Q2. They must be on a different quarter system than I am. But
right.
There's a whole bunch of data here, and it actually looks at listening time. They actually break it down by hour, and I don't know quite how they got that, but the peak time for people to listen to podcasts, believe it or not, is between 8 and 9 p.m. That's at least what they say. Now, I would have thought that
8 a.m. and 9 p.m.?
8 p.m. and 9 p.m. are the peak
just
listening.
1 hour? Just 1 hour?
That's the peak. If you look at, for example, 6 a.m., minutes spent 17 minutes and 19 seconds. At 7 a.m., 22 minutes and 37 seconds. At 8 a.m., 25 minutes and 22 seconds. And it continues to climb all the way through the day until at 9 p.m., people listen to an average of 37 minutes and 43 seconds of podcasts. And then it drops rapidly after 9 p.m., going down to as low as 10 minutes and 11 seconds at 4 a.m. So I don't know how they really figured this out from a content consumption standpoint, but this was looking at TV and radio and digital. And these lines all stay pretty close together. Radio drops off like a rock after 5 p.m., as you would kind of expect. But
once they get out of the car, right?
Yeah. But I would have thought that the listing peak would have been much higher between 7 and 9 a.m., and I thought it would have been higher between 4 and 6 p.m. than all the other hours, but not according to these folks. I find myself watching YouTube at about 9 or 10 p.m. That's when I try to catch up with the subscribed shows because I've kind of wrapped everything up for the day. I'm down breathing, and I basically have a little time to relax. I don't have time to watch YouTube at all. In fact, we don't watch. We cut the cord. My TV watching time at this point is maybe limited to a Saturday or Sunday afternoon watching a movie or something. I'm not watching hardly any TV.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that this Nielsen stuff came out and said radio is still 92%.
Okay.
And then streaming audio on a smartphone is 43%, which could be, I'm not sure how they break that out between podcasts and streaming audio on a smartphone, but I would think they would be related.
Right.
And then the streaming audio on a tablet is broken out as a separate number too at 14%. So I guess it just means more people are consuming this stuff on digital devices, but radio appears to be still dominating, I guess. And that's probably because of the car. I know. I get it.
Okay, so I get in my car. If my kids have used it, Bluetooth is selected.
Right.
I change it. I purposely change it to like FM, and it'll be on Bluetooth. Radio's screwed on these younger adults. If go ahead. If you're a radio executive, listen to the show, and you let your kids borrow the car, put it on FM 100 or whatever, and then if the kids' phones are synced with your car, when you get in next time, see where the setting is on your radio.
Right.
Also, this cropped up again. Well, I actually had to tease you a little bit, Rob. New and noteworthy.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
Rob, you had a little fun this week, didn't you?
Yeah. It's called whack-a-mole, right? And sometimes that whack-a-mole is in your backyard.
Yeah. And I had and it happens with us too. We have a writer, a blogger that does the blogging for the website, and we come up with a list of topics that we want to cover, and then that individual writes the blog post, but he is not allowed to hit publish. Because I go in and I'll read it, and I'll say, okay, good. Yeah. Oh, no, edit, and then I'll let him know, hey, recheck what I've used. This makes sense. And what it really does is it takes time. If you're a company and you have a contract writer, it takes time for them to understand your voice. Right. And so anyway, I know what you went through. But I felt kind of bad for you. You got a little bit of shot across the brow by your peers.
Yes, I did. I got some saying, "Oh, Rob, thank goodness that your peers are looking out for you."
So anyway, that'd have been nice if they'd have just sent you a little note. Hey, check this.
Right.
But no, let's go for the jugular 12 gauge shotgun.
Right. It's all over Pod News,
all over social.
Right. Yeah, right.
So quit worrying about new and noteworthy, folks. Let's another topic that came up was how long should your podcast be? And
that damn topic coming up again.
Here's what I'm going to tell you. We're just about out of content for the day. So your show should be as long as it needs to be, where you can keep people engaged. When we start reaching for content, that's the time to say, well, that's it.
I'm out of here.
So I think we're a prime example of that. But comes back to his average commuting times of 26 minutes. And if you make your podcast longer than that, they may not come back and listen. And, the overall average length is 43, there's some shows out there that I listen to on a regular basis, 2 hours and 34 minutes. It's all, Todd, it's about the content.
Yeah, Todd, I also like the Roman Mars's quote in the Pod News too. It was, say, if you have 100,000 listeners, which so many podcasts do,
right?
And you edit out one useless minute, you are saving 100,000 wasted minutes in the world. You're practically a hero.
Okay, so I'll try a little experiment here. We do not edit. I've just wasted 5 seconds of your time that you can't get back forever. So
that is, yeah.
Right. It's. I understand where he's coming from.
I do too. But it's funny, right?
It is.
It's a funny quote. I can't believe he was serious about it.
The goal is to have them listen longer, stay more engaged. So that means they're not going to listen to another show as much. No, I truly believe that you have to respect your listeners' time.
Right.
And I tell my audience, if I'm going to go long, I'm starting to go long. So I apologize. I'm going long here, folks, but this is too good. Let's continue to go. And usually the emails I get back when I apologize like that is, stop apologizing. It was great. More, and I don't get the, like, you took an extra 5 minutes on the show. Damn you, I'm unsubscribing.
Todd, you're just not respecting your listeners' time. Sorry.
Yeah.
You should edit out every and any useless content, right? But what is useless content?
I think context is important.
Useless is such a subjective term, right?
Right. And
who's it useless for?
And I'm sitting here with doing live video, and I've got a runny nose, and I didn't bring a Kleenex in here, and I'm wiping my nose with my hand, and I'm sure the viewing audience is like, gross, but the listening audience didn't know I was doing that until I told them, so.
I just shouldn't have said anything.
But
that's wasted. That's a wasted 10 seconds.
No, but there's, I think the story and the situation and what's going on in a show and the pauses and sometimes if you have an editor that's editing your show and you have told this big story and you want to make a point and you stop with this dramatic stop, and then they come back and cut that out because they're just looking for gaps, you really jacked your show in what you're trying to put across, So some editors don't listen. They just look for gaps. Oh, we can get a second there, a second here, half a second here, and
but Todd, I think the question that it comes up in my mind when I hear this discussion is, we've been talking about this issue for years, right?
Yeah.
And why is it coming up again now? I guess what has changed in the medium that is driving this view that we would never have heard before?
Someone needed an article to write and was saying what we're going to talk about, and I said, well, I haven't talked about how long a podcast should be in about a year, so let me do another article on how long a podcast should be. That's why it's coming up.
Well, it's also about editing too, right? It's got both of these things, and then one of the other parts that was talked about too is, how long should a podcast be? As long as it needs to be,
right?
But not 1 minute longer.
Try back soon.
Well, we triggered one of the devices here. Not to give James a hard time because James wrote this. Is that maybe he's looking for content. He's got his opinion, and he wants his opinion to be known, and he's got it,
which is fine.
And maybe he hadn't written about that. So, I don't begrudge someone for writing an article, but, even us, sometimes I'm like, well, we haven't touched on this topic in a while. It's a good time. Let's go back and hit them again. So, from that perspective, I think it's important. I'm not saying that article is bad. It's a conversation that continues to come up again and again. But we also have to remember, Rob, 5,000 new people are joining podcasting space every week.
Right. And these topics keep coming up over and over again because they're topics that are of interest to those new podcasters too, right?
Because most of them are not going to go back and listen to 230 episodes of the New Media Show and get a PhD in podcasting.
Right. Well, yeah. Yeah. But it's I also think this is a reflection of development in the medium towards a perception of quality, right?
Right.
And I think this drives this kind of agenda of editing is a differentiator, right? It's a way to make your program sound better or higher quality than someone else, right? So there's a little bit of a competitive motivation behind this. Does it really create better, higher quality content? That's debatable because it's all subjective, right?
Yeah.
Useless content to one person is valuable content to another. I don't know how you make a blanket statement about that.
Well, I think what it really boils down to is you do what you want to do. There's no rules here, and you can take whatever suggestions people give and throw them out the window.
Right. I mean, I've been doing editing on podcasts for years, and sure, I think that there is a little bit of a quality element to this discussion, but I think you need to talk about that part of it. I mean, I think this concept of a useless minute isn't clear enough on what we're talking about here.
And it's well known. I don't edit because I don't have time to edit. I'd be divorced if I had to edit.
Right.
And I didn't want to pay someone. I got to survive. I got to keep the lights on, keep the food, family fed. I look at that from a budget, and also, a lot of people right out the gate are paying people to edit. I'm like, okay, that's good that you've done that financial commitment. But I think there goes a lot to doing your own. Well, this has been debated 25 ways to Sunday. So I mean,
Todd, do you think that you would have been a more successful podcaster if you would have done more editing? I think that's the question here.
I wouldn't be podcasting. I would have quit.
Okay. Well,
because if I had someone else to edit for me, sure, probably would have been better. But if I'd have had to edit myself, there's no way. I'd have quit already. I couldn't have sustained 14 years of doing a show. There's no way.
Okay. So it's really an endurance question for you. It's
for me,
being able to keep up with being able to do this.
Yeah.
It's not a quality question for you.
And I even hired someone this year to do pre-production, help me get the content ready to go with the show. And it's been a godsend to have him as an editor. I mean, or a producer of the show. And I come in and I review and I go through and I might add and him and I are in sync. So I found someone that was an extension of myself, but I got lucky in finding that person,
Right.
And so I did save some time. I save an hour. I say that for me, that saves me an hour, a very valuable hour. So I guess it all depends. And if you're paying for someone to edit, maybe it's saving you. It's worth it to pay that person because your time's more valuable, and you're paying that person to 2 hours of editing so that you can focus on the content. So I'm not begrudging people that edit at all.
Well, and I think a podcaster can learn from going back and spending time with their audio like that too. They can learn about what they're doing in their program, how it sounds, how maybe to improve.
But I also think that there is there was no editors when we started doing this, Rob. There was no businesses that were editing podcasts. People couldn't have survived, number one. They would have been, they just couldn't. Rice and beans is what, that's how much money there was in the early days. But now people are making a full-time living editing. So it's a little bit different situation. I get credit where credit's due, but I'm just kind of old school and I'm not going to edit.
Well, and these storytelling podcasts like we talked about on the show this week are heavy in the post-production.
They have to edit.
But they're also heavy in the pre-production side too. So you have to be diligent. Those aren't the kind of productions that you can probably realistically, I don't know, I'd like to see someone try it, but to produce one of those things live would be an interesting production, right?
Yeah. Dr. Floyd did some live.
Right.
Yeah. But 2 or 3 hours, he's probably got 10 hours of prep. Who knows how? That's why the cost of what they're doing has got to be remarkably expensive. So there has to be remarkable returns for doing that. You've got to generate some serious revenue to pay for all that and still have enough money to eat. I think it's a big part of it. Now for this show, we'll slap it together an hour and a half, 40 minutes, we're done, and I have about another 35, 40 minutes worth of work to get the show up online once we get done. Yeah. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But if I had to spend 2 more hours on it, we probably wouldn't be doing the new media show.
Right. And kind of lead into kind of probably our final topic here
Sure.
is talking about this new Rodecaster Pro that came out.
Yeah, everyone's raving about it.
Everybody really, really likes it. So far, it seems like it has the juice to power SM7B.
Awesome.
So at least that's the impression that I've gotten so far.
Wow, that's saying something.
Yep, and it's got some capabilities. It's a little on the spendy side, but
I want to hear that. I want to hear an SMB7 hooked up to that. I want to hear no edited audio. I want to hear raw audio and just listen. Because here's the key. I guess I'm going to have to buy one. I really was not needing to buy another toy. But
are you really going to use it, Todd, with the setup you have there?
I could. There's some situations I could use it, and believe me, I'm always farming stuff out anyway. So maybe. But to plug the mic in and just listen to it with the amps at a level where you need to be, and if it doesn't go shh,
right.
If you don't hear the white noise, if it's clear, then you winner chicken dinner. Sign me up. But
it might be a good mixer for your Columbus studio.
Right? Columbus Studio's got 8 positions, so
it's got 8 positions.
Yeah,
this doesn't support 8 positions.
Yeah, we're wiring it for 6, but we can go to 8 if we have to.
Okay, I think this one is only
4,
3 or 4, something like that.
4, I think. Yeah.
And I think it can bring in calls on your mobile.
Yeah, I think that's cool.
Bluetooth also.
Yeah, that's really slick.
And a Skype connection as well.
That's really slick. So smart on them for doing this.
Right.
No more have to worry about mix minus and all that other stuff.
Oh yeah, that was always so hard to explain to podcasters how to get that set up.
And
on
if
their
it
mixer.
will do Bluetooth with just a regular phone call,
right?
Oh,
that's awesome.
Awesome. Today we had good audio all the way through the show on Skype. I would often tell people, sometimes I've gotten asked questions, are you and Rob in the same room? I said, have you watched the video portion of the show? So Skype serves a good purpose, but I'm curious to hear how it sounds just over a phone connection. I think Skype's better than a phone connection, but
by far.
But we'll see. We will see when because if you're connected via Bluetooth, it might be a little different. I don't know.
Yeah, and we'll have to see on that, right?
Yeah, it's got a soundboard and everything too, so you can play some jingles or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's got like 8 touch boxes on the if you have like intro or exit or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now one thing I did notice in there, it didn't appear to be numbered, which would be helpful.
So I think that I'm thinking about stuff I do live and going around. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have my kitchen table all full of the gear I'm taking to CES this afternoon and having everything plugged in.
Right.
And doing the pre-test pack out. I could think that this particular box might actually be good in a live situation where you have 4 people, no more than 4 people on a live remote type of thing where it'll hook into a system that's actually doing live streaming as well. So again, I guess I'm just going to have to get one. It's $600 though, man.
Right. And it also records inside the mixer too.
Right.
So it's not just a pass-through device. It's actually a recorder as well.
There was a external recorder that we bought for the studio. Let me see here. Mike sent it. I think it's from Plantronic. Let me go see if I can find a link, if I can bring it up here. But there it is. It's a Denon. It's the Denon DN-300R solid state SD and USB audio recorder. This thing, I'm going to be honest with you, for $199 for those of you that aren't mobile, for those of you that have a a studio. Let me see if I can bring this up.
Also, show a photograph of that new Rode.
The Rode Podcaster. Too. Yeah. So here's the Denon.
Right.
We really like this particular device. Let's see if I can find it here on the Close Rode Podcaster. I think it's called Rode Broadcaster, isn't it?
Rodecaster Pro.
There it is. So if I can bring up a better, it says top seller.
Right.
There it is.
Okay. So it has different colors on those touch pads.
Yeah. But pretty simple device. Let's see if we got some additional pictures here. All right, let's look at the back view. So it's got XLR inputs, 4 XLR inputs. See, this is another thing it's smart. 4 headphone outs. You know why I like this?
Right.
This is almost worth the purchase of the device in itself. If you have more than one people, you have to buy a splitter. You have to buy a headphone distribution system. So...
Well, it's a separate box that you can funnel audio into and then route to different headphones.
But this, you can have 4 people all jacked in at the same time. So this is big. This, in my opinion, is the smartest thing that they added to this whole thing was the 4 headphone outputs.
Yeah.
And it's small. And I'm hoping that they're selling a case for this thing, so you can put in a case to move around with it, so that the sliders don't get damaged when you're transporting. And it's also got the Affix. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, it's got the Affix, I think, big bottom.
Can you zoom in on it a little closer so people can see it?
Yeah, I think that was it, Rob. I think that was.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, okay. I might be able to see if I. There we go. It's got this Affix. Most people have no clue what the Affix big bottom is. This show, I use for my audio path something called the Affix Big Bottom. It's a box. It's the Aural Exciter. And
well, that sounds bad.
Okay, so that's really what the box is called. The Big Bottom Aural Exciter and it is a secret weapon for this show in getting some of the tone I've wanted. And it sits right there. 2 channels. I don't run you through it, just me. But it's a silver box. It's on the bottom. So when I saw that this box has the Affix Big Bottom Aural Exciter on it, I was like, whoa, oh, another thing that made me kind of sit back and say, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention.
So that's really a compressor, isn't it?
No, it's an audio processor. It helps with, and I don't see where you make the settings on that. I don't know if you do it via software.
It's probably automatic, I would think.
Maybe automatic, but with me, I can adjust it, how much tone, and it has nothing to do with a compressor whatsoever. But this doesn't have a compressor. So that is probably the single limitation of it. But, and I'm looking at it here again, and I'm saying, okay, so I see everything in. It's recording on its own. It has a left-right out. So if you want to feed that into a different device. For me, I would feed the output into a TriCaster, so that would, I think this will do everything I need it to do. I may just have to buy this and take it to CES and use it.
Yeah,
it's that good. I was waiting to hear the reports on the preamp, so.
Well, it would be a way also that you could potentially get a backup recording too of anything that you're doing live.
Yeah, always run 2 recorders here anyway.
Right.
So, God forbid something goes sideways. I'm actually doing 3 recordings, believe it or not. The TriCaster does 1. I do video capture over here and then the audio. So I'm kind of backed up 3 ways, but most people aren't running the type of setup I'm running here.
No.
All right, we've gone way, way long here. So,
okay.
Rodecaster Pro, integrated podcast production studio, $599.
And I believe it's shipping.
They say pre-order here on, let's see, I'm doing a request a stock alert. All right. Yeah, some people are getting them. So it's supposed to start shipping on the 15th, which is today. So we'll have to see who has them in stock. All right, everyone. I'm Todd at blueberry.com. At Geek News is my Twitter account. Of course, you can find me at geeknewscentral.com or at newmediashow.com. We want you to subscribe to the show. Please do if you haven't already. Rob?
Rob at voxnest.com. Also on Twitter at Rob Greenlee with 2 E's. So those are the best places. You can certainly find me at robgreenlee.com too.
So it's been our pleasure bringing you the show today. We'll be, I think we're back next Saturday. I'm still here and around. Okay, so we'll be on for the 22nd. Give you something to listen to as you're getting ready to go on Christmas holiday here. But thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time here on the New Media Show. Take care. Bye bye.
Take care, everybody. Thanks. Bye.
Wow.